Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Championship Leadership Podcast. We got Jay Nixon, my man, in Texas. Where in Texas again?
You know what? I'm actually from Texas, a
You're
little
from
tiny
Texas?
town. Yeah, a tiny town called Cisco, which is kind of between Abilene and Fort Worth. But I actually live in Palm Springs, California now.
Live in Palm Springs. That's right. I do remember that.
Yeah.
Now you said I just remembered us talking about Texas in your days growing up there. And
Texas at heart, though, man. I was born in Texas, love Texas. You know, grew high school, the whole
You
nine
still
yards.
sound
So,
like you're from Texas. So.
yeah, I still got a little twang every once in a while.
Yeah. I love it. You can't lose that.
No.
But yeah, thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to be on your show not that long ago, and
Yeah.
that was awesome. So I like to kick it off this way with championship leadership's the name of the podcast. So what comes to mind for you when you hear championship leadership? What's that mean to you?
God, man, so many things. Like I immediately, we just started talking about Texas, so I just had like a flashback to like, growing up and when you grow up in Texas, like you just naturally play football, even, before you can walk. And so a lot of the leadership for me early on came from like coaches. And so,
yeah, right.
I think of like coachability, and I think about now, considering myself as a coach and a leader, like one of the number one, components and values that I feel like I have to have is still unbelievable coachability. And so, when I think about leadership like that, I think of, integrity, doing the things that you ask other people to do, living that life authentically. And that's what I remember back about, some of my coaches. I think you think of a couple that just come to mind that were really pivotal and instrumental in my growth and development and probably who I am today, just based on how they consistently showed up with the same messaging, the same commitment, the same energy. Yeah. And I think that's what championship leadership is in a nutshell. Is if you look at let's use football as analogies. Since we're kind of in football season. Like, Bill Belichick is probably not regarded as the most, he's not teddy bearish. He's not soft. He's not going to give you a hug. But if he's anything, and Saban the same way, they would both be considered, two at the top of their craft. Consistently committed to the same messaging over and over and over again, regardless of who they're coaching.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which is a big point, right? Doesn't matter. It's consistency. You know who you're going to get every single day. You told the story when we last talked about Bobby Bowden. You got to expect him. He's another one of those. Rest in peace, Bobby Bowden. But what was that again? Because that left a big mark on you, from what I remember.
Yeah, right? You know what? I would, growing up in Texas back then, I don't even know if it's still this way now, but like the UIL was like they wouldn't let Texas kids participate in camps. Like we couldn't go to a football camp.
That's so weird. In Texas,
you couldn't go to an extracurricular outside of your school blank camp. Like, like now they have these passing academies and all that. Yeah, so I'm sure things has changed. This was like the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah. But I went to North Carolina to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp that was designed around sports. And so when the other kids were doing like the drills and the skills and things, we had to do other stuff. And so one day I remember we were sitting in a room and, there was probably about 10 of us from Texas, and through the doors walked Bobby Bowden, and even as a young kid, I grew up watching Florida State and the Miami rivalries and, I knew exactly.
That was their heyday back then.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So he walked in and it was like, the Dalai Lama walking through like a golden aura around him. And, he's got that voice that's just like, it's the most Southern thing you've ever heard. Yep. And so he just started talking to us about, about leadership and about being the best version of yourself. And he said a couple of epiphanal things that I kind of recalled once, they announced that he had passed away. And one of the most pivotal things that lasted with me was the biggest mistake that you can make as a human and as a football player and just in life is to continue to practice your mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so he was talking about, we've all heard that, good is the enemy of great and great is the enemy of excellence. He was like, don't rest and don't stop until you're good as you're great and you're great as you're better and your better is your best.
Yeah.
And so he's, and you got Bobby Bowden telling you these things. It's
Yeah,
not
right.
like, it's not like your mom's telling you,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
be better. It's
There's almost some like heavenly music probably playing in the back of the room.
absolutely. There's like
too, right?
harps and angels and like, and you're on the edge of your seat and you're like, yes, sir. And so,
Yeah.
as a young, influential, football player at the time with aspirations to play at the highest level, it was like, I mean, that was the holy grail. I remember leaving there and thinking to myself, this was so much more valuable than what those other guys got. Like, running an out route or,
Right.
or picking up a block or stuff like that. So I got lucky that so that's a good lesson too, is like, oftentimes you think you're being punished for something. Like we couldn't go play, right? And as a young football player, what do you want to do? You want to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got something that has lasted me my entire life.
Yep. Right.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. That's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about you for everybody that's not familiar. Like, so in Palm Springs, what do you do? What's your story? How did you get where you are today? And what is it that you're up to?
Yeah, you know what? I'm a former corporate guy. I grew up like a lot of us thinking that I was supposed to wear a tie and, have an office or a business card and a company card, all that jazz. And I did that. Very unfulfilled, even though, I worked for pharmaceutical companies and the largest nutritional manufacturers in the world, but I wasn't living a fulfilled life. And so now, fast forward, for the last probably 15, close to 20 years, I've been, running my own business. So I own a actual brick and mortar boutique fitness studio in Palm Desert, which is kind of a suburb of Palm Springs. I've written 2 books. I've got my own supplement line. And then I do, transformation and optimizational coaching for humans. I kind of use fitness and nutrition as a way to get people into my world.
Yeah.
And then I start working on like the psychology and the mindset of kind of why they're stuck and where they're stuck at. So that's me in a nutshell. I just like to say, more than anything, I'm just the guy who gives a shit about other people. And I want to see other people win. And so I'll do anything and everything to get myself in front of as many people as possible, just to give them that little glimmer that, they can be and do and have all the things they want.
Yeah. 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 That's powerful. I just saw, maybe you posted, or for some reason, I just saw one of your books recently.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably posted. What is it?
Yeah, I've got 2 books. The first one I wrote is called The Overweight Mind, and I call it the undeniable truth behind why you're not losing weight. Yeah, and it's all the psychological reasons why people are stuck with you can't lose weight. And so the reason I wrote it was I had helped people lose hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and then they would go on about their lives, and then I would see them later on, and it would be like, what happened?
Right,
like they gain it all back.
Yeah.
And so after years of doing that, I'm like, okay, Jay, like we can keep doing this mechanically, or we can really dig into the reasons why people are where they are. So that's why I wrote The Overweight Mind. And the second book is called The Purpose of Pain. It's how to turn tragedy into triumph. And that's kind of a little bit of a piece of my story, and then how I used the tragedies of my younger life to kind of catapult me or propel me into, using tragedy as a way to get better and to evolve and not allow it to have me stuck and not evolving as a human. And so, they're both really, heavy on mindset and, being the human you were really born to be, regardless of circumstances, challenges, adversities, etc.
I love the Overweight Mind. Like I said, when I saw that, I was like, that's awesome. But it's not just, people do that all the time in weight loss, but people do that all the time in life. I just came across Andrew Huberman's a video of his. Are you familiar with him at all? That I saw, he was just on Rogan, which is maybe part of the reason that one of his videos popped up. But he was just talking, he from what I could tell, he's kind of into the neuroscience and like chemical, like dopamine and why, people do certain things. But his message was about, people chasing the result. Like in your case, it's losing the weight, and they lose the weight and they're so tied to the end result of doing that and getting that huge hit that you're left empty after it and not knowing what to do. And because you didn't tie the dopamine to the journey of the whole process of doing it every single day, you fail and you kind of just fall back. He talks about it in like athletes. How many people have you seen rise to the top in their profession and then never be able to get back there again, or because they can't replace that feeling. And it's actually kind of a underwhelming feeling too, when they get there. Right.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
What now?
it's going to be way cooler than actually
Yeah.
what it is. And so it was just really interesting little video clip that I came across today that really kind of plays into that.
I always tell people, like, you could take that book and remove weight loss from it. And it's the practical, it's the practical things of why we all struggle with everything that we struggle with. And, I think humans, we like to think that we're vastly different from each other, and we're really not. Like, you do a lot of speaking as well as I do. I mean, you get the same questions from, you could be talking to different audiences, right? You could have an audience of complete women, an audience of complete men, an audience of 30-year-olds, an audience of 70-year-olds in various, whatever. And the questions are going to be pretty similar. They may be asked in a different version, but the baseline of the question is pretty, in the same vein.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Championship leadership. Who are some of those championship leaders that have impacted your life? And more so, like, what are some of the characteristics of those individuals that really stand out, and maybe that you've even taken to kind of help mold who you are as a leader?
Yeah, I'm big on talking about this, because I think a lot of times, like, we look to, we think that people are role models and things of that nature, like sports figures and actors and stuff like that. And that couldn't be farther from the truth for me. Like, I'm not interested in any of that.
Yeah. What's the saying? Like, be careful who you look up to as role models, because if you ever meet them in person, you're going to be like extremely let down.
Quick story on that. I had the opportunity. I used to consult for the NFL and the NFL alumni. So I've gotten to meet pretty much every player that you and I grew up watching from, I've had lunch with Terry Bradshaw. I've spent an entire day with him.
Oh, no way.
I've met Marino, Elway, you name it, like Emmett Smith, Barry Sanders, like the list, Lawrence Taylor, the list could go on and on and on. I was actually at Don Shula's 80th birthday party. It was me, and there's only about 25 of us there. So when I say I've met these people, I haven't just said, oh, hey, I've spent time with them. And you would be underwhelmed with 90% of the interactions. They're just people, guys. They're just like you and I. They just happen to be a little bigger, a little taller, maybe a little faster, and maybe you can do something that you haven't maybe crafted or having the opportunity to do. So for me, when I look for leadership, I look for consistency over everything. I think a lot of times in the world that we live in today, like, everybody craves a leadership in some fashion, right? Whether it be a mentor or a coach or whatever it might be. And the one thing I tell people is, when you're looking for a leader, when you're looking for a coach, a mentor, just maybe even somebody just to follow, on a social media platform, before you get too invested in that person being the guru that you perceive them to be, just do some checks, right? Like what's their consistency been like? Has their messaging changed? A funny thing, one of my clients posted a video of me on YouTube from almost like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who is this joker? Who is this young,
kind of fun to watch that.
Yeah. Who's this young kid? Yeah. Who's this young kid? But I said the same thing I'm saying today.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some value in finding those consistent leaders that they're not changing their messaging based on the landscape of whatever it is. They're just consistently, and committed to helping people live a better life. So for me, that's one of the number one things. And then I always look for the people that are doing and have done the things that I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I want to keep growing and exponentially changing my life. And the best way to do that is to have a coach, leader, mentor that has done that. And I think that's when you go back to, like, the Bobby Bowden story. Like, for him to say what he said to us had validity to me, because but at that time he had coached thousands and thousands and thousands of people just like me. And so he knew, and he knows what the formula is. And so it wasn't like he was a first year coach and he had, there was his first roster of 80 guys. It was like, he'd been through that time and time and time again. And the consistency of doing that crafted him to understand what it was that he was telling us. And so I think there's value in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. Yeah. I appreciate that. Those are some awesome stories as well. So what's your vision? Because, I talk, like, you already brought up Belichick and Saban. I mean, I almost always mention their names when I ask this question, because, to do it at the highest level against the best in the world. And also you're the target because you have been so consistent every single year, and you just continue to find ways to win and to stay, because everybody's like a copycat league, right? They're trying to figure out what you're doing and do it themselves. And so you got to stay ahead of that, and to consistently be able to stay ahead of that is crazy. Absolutely a form of championship leadership, but I think it's because they have this vision that so many others can't see, and they're also just crazy enough to take action on it, right? They have the courage to implement it. So what's the vision and the impact, more importantly, that you want to make, let's say even in the next 5 years? Maybe 5 years just goes by so fast.
Absolutely. I love again, like the Saban, Belichick, those guys as the analogy. And, I think one of the things that most people are looking to their competition in order to see what they're going to do next.
Yeah.
And I think the vision word is highly appropriate for both of those guys, because I think, well, if I do what my competition's doing, by the time I implement that, figure that out, they're going to be doing something else. Right.
Yeah,
and then what am I going to do? And that's where most leaders and most people are like, they're chasing that. Whereas when you get a real leader who's got his own vision, they're so far out in front of that. And that is why they consistently figure out a way to always be a little bit ahead or a little bit better than that. And so I take that as kind of my lighthouse for like my life. Instead of getting enamored with a social media highlight reel of somebody else that's doing something that I might think is cool or whatever, I'm consistently saying, like, what do I need to do to push myself to that next level of Jay Nixon, where I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I've got to cast this vision and then live into that vision in order to get to where it is I want to go. So the impact that I want to make, man, is, like I said earlier, like, I lived a life for a long time. I told you the story, like on my cast, my father got killed when I was 5. And then I lost a lot of really, my grandfather, one of my really close mentors, and then my best friend committed suicide at 25. And so for that 20-year period, like, chaos would be the best, no vision at all. Right. Lack of vision. And so I know what that's like. And so I think that's a great place for me to look back on and use that tragedy to say, this is what's going to be my triumph. And so I never get caught in the rearview mirror. I might glance up there from time to time, but I'm always visionarily forecasting, like, what's the next stage of me having the ability to make an impact on somebody else's life. And I can't do that unless I'm consistently trying to broaden my own perspectives and my own belief systems, and my, being around people like you and just the other, awesome individuals that I get the opportunity by having my own podcast and then being on podcasts is like, every time we have a conversation, like, I come away with it with a new level of like, okay, well, that's a different way to look at A, B, C, or D. And then I think a lot of people do that. But then for me, implementation is the biggest thing in my life. I think a lot of people ingest, but then they don't implement.
Yeah.
I'm a radical implementer, meaning like, if I get something, so I don't read a book I'm not the kind of guy that's at the end of the year going to be like, hey, I read 100 books this year and, like, get the cheers. It's like, if I read 2 books and I implement radically a strategy from 1 or 2 of those books that propels my life to a different level, then I won, man, because that's going to give me something that nobody else has, because they're just reading for sport. I'm reading for application. Yeah. So that's kind of how I look at the next version of me, is like, if I consistently keep growing to the next version of who I am, like, and all I care about is this, making a positive impact on the people's lives that I get to see, get to hear my voice, get to be around me, get to see something I've read or written or whatever it is. That's a win for me. Like, I don't have the visions. I don't need to be somebody, but I want to be somebody influential enough that I might get the opportunity to make an impact on your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, I was just had a podcast with a guy yesterday, Doug Lodmell, an attorney down in Scottsdale, but he was talking about, we got on that topic a little bit of like, people consuming information and like how much of information we actually really truly retain, whether it's listening to a podcast, reading a book, at a seminar, and it's super low. Like, and a lot of it, is based on people's current beliefs and what, if that doesn't line up with what they feel they believe in the world right now. And so to to just consume information, to consume it is, a lot of people have that as a badge. Like you say, you see it all the time. Oh, I read 100 books this year. And it's like, yeah, what did you do with any of it? What did you like? Tell me the top 5 things that you learned from those 100 books. And they, if you called them on the spot would
tell me what you think about this. I just actually wrote this in my phone before we got on the call because I had this epiphany, and it's, most people read or listen to a book once. I listen or read to a book sometimes up to 10 times because I understand that the human brain and its need for immersion.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so if I was you, I would stop saying, oh, I've heard that before, because all that means is that you haven't changed or evolved since the last time you heard that.
Right.
So for me, I love hearing things that I've heard before because I'm different than I was the first, second, third, fourth, maybe even hopefully 5th time that I heard them. And that's going to give me the opportunity to use that beautiful nugget to transform my life, as opposed to having a whole bag of nuggets in the corner that I don't even know what to do with.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, if you, which brings up another thought for me is like, I always say like, 4 of the most dangerous words is I already know that, or I've already heard that. Right. And if you could stay open to, sometimes you'll hear the same thing 5 different times and hear 5 different things, right? If you're like really open to it.
Yep.
Like, man, it just hits different depending on where you're at, what's going on.
And I think about the repetitiousness too. I mean, you played football at a really high level. Like I think about the amount of times that I ran the same play in practice, right? Over and over and over and over again, because the difference between a successful play and a non-successful play at the highest level is a fraction of a foot. It's the angle that you hit the hole at. It's the speed at which you hit the hole at. It's the, you know what I mean? It's like all those things matter. And unless you can do that repetitiously in your sleep, the likelihood of you being precise enough to make that happen. And that's why the highest level is the highest level, right? That's why it's the professional league. And so I think a lot of times people in the quote unquote real world, if we implemented those same strategies and those same like repetitious things on how we live our lives, then the fractions become so important. And then you get to hit the hole at the precise angle, and it makes life so much easier.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely. I usually ask this question, but I think I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I usually ask to talk about like, a really critical moment in your life, and if you had chosen differently in that moment, what would your life look like? But
dude, I got a beautiful story for that.
Okay. Well, let's hit it. And then I do have another question to kind of a little bit way more off topic. And
this is actually pivotal in my success. And so when I first started my own business, like, I started like, quote unquote personal training and just having, doing gym. So, I bounced around from like gym to gym to gym, like, bringing my clients with me. Didn't have my own facility like I do now. I was renting the basement of a country club here in Palm Desert. If you guys have ever been to Palm Springs, there's like 1,000 golf courses, and the country clubs are nice. We get about 1.5 inches of rain out here per year. So this was about, I think I always have it written down because I like to recall it. This was in 2014. I was in LA. Lori and I were at a conference, and I got a phone call from the country club, and they're like, "Hey man, you're not going to believe this. We've just gotten more rain in the last hour than we've gotten in the last 10 years. And the entire basement is flooded, gone. Yahtzee. It's going to be months before we can get this figured out." 5 days after that, I was going to Maui for my 40th birthday. So I wasn't even going to be in town to do what I needed to do with my business. So when I came back from Maui, I was going to be businessless, nowhere to take my clients. And so I had to make a decision I could have regressed and said, "Hey, I'll just call somebody up and say, hey, can I come back over there and bring my clients?" Or was I going to take the big, bold leap forward and say, "Hey, this is God and the universe saying, okay, bro, how serious are you about this training crap?"
Right.
And so I had to make the decision, sight unseen in Maui, didn't see it. The real estate agent had a cell phone walking around the building doing this. And I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I've been there ever since. And since that day, you guys got to hear this. Since that day, which was a big financial commitment, my income has 100x'd. My life has changed. I hadn't written a book at that time. I didn't have coaching clients all over the world at that time. My life went from, hey, you're just a personal trainer, to this explosion of who I'm supposed to be. And it was presented to me in the form of a tragedy or an adversity.
Right.
And I got the opportunity to turn that into something that's exponentially changed my life. So
Yeah.
I didn't mean to like answer that.
No, that's great.
But I feel like
when I
that's
saw you light up,
story.
I was like, all right, he's got a good story. Cause man, that could have went so many different ways. You could have chose, and many would have chose a few different options other than that one, for sure. Yeah. So I love it. That's beautiful.
Thank you, man.
Because there's a lot of people in those moments right now, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And
the flood's metaphorical. The flood is totally metaphorical for whatever it is that you're going through in your life, and you're being presented with two options. It's either I go forward through it, or I regress backwards away from it. Yeah. And if you regress backwards away from it, like, we know the result, right?
Yeah.
We know what happens.
Yeah. Well, all right. Here's the question I was going to ask, which is kind of really off the script, which is fine because I like going off the script. Because last time we talked on your podcast, we both played some JUCO ball, and man, if you haven't played JUCO ball, like, you really missed out. First of all, you just missed out. Like, probably some of the most talented football players on the earth that you never heard of, because like they just couldn't get to class or whatever it is. But like, just some phenomenal athletes and just some incredible stories. And so I want to kind of ask you kind of asked me this, and I feel like I didn't have a great story for you yet, but what's a great memory you have from playing your JUCO days that and then maybe what's something that you were able to take from it to help serve you in what you do today?
So many, something that just popped into my mind. This is going to be a little stretch, but I'm going to tell it because I feel like it's sometimes when you win, the struggle's not over with, right? You still have to do it. You might have this perception that, okay, I've gotten to where kind of what you said a while ago, like, I got here, now what? Yeah. So life's always going to give you an opportunity to say, okay, do you really want to be here? Do you really deserve to be here? So I remember this, it was my freshman year of JUCO ball. And like you said, I mean, some of the dudes are just stone cold ballers. Yeah. And I was never the biggest, fastest, strongest, anything, but I knew the playbook like the back of my hand, which is a running back is essential, because if you can't pick up the blitz, you can't play. Right. They brought in this kid. He was about 5 days late to camp, and he was a stud. I mean, he was, a high school, like track All-American, whatever, played my position. And I had two options at that state. I'm like, hey man, this guy's obviously more physically gifted than me. Yep. I mean, nobody was denying that. The coaches knew it. I knew it. He knew it. So I had to make a decision right there. I was like, okay, here's my options. I can outwork him, but that's it. I'm not going to be faster than him. I'm not going to be bigger than him, taller, stronger, any of that, but I can outwork him. And so that's what I made the commitment to do that day. And so what happened about 10 days after that, the coaches made a decision. They're like, well, it looks like Jay's going to be the starter in that position. And he wasn't going to get to start. He didn't like that. He had never in his life been in that position of adversity. Sure. I had. And so I knew what it was going to take. Yep. And so I basically, in his brain, I took his dream away from him. Did he leave? Well, here's what happened. He wasn't willing to outwork me. That day in the locker room, I had to physically fist fight him. Oh, really? Yeah, because this is JUCO ball 101, guys. This is not unusual. No. I'm in my locker, and so his brain goes to, well, if I can't have the position, I'm going to take it from him physically. Yeah, right. And so I had to make the second decision is I had to get we got in a physical, brawl like you wouldn't believe in the locker room, right? And, in today's world, like everybody went to jail, the program, the coach, after it all went down, coach came in. So what happened? Somebody said, this went down, that went down. He's like, are we good? And the kid went home. Yeah. He left and went home. Right. And so that was, I did my job. I won the position fair, square, but I still had to take a next step at the end of that. Not because I wanted to, but because it was the only way that was going to end, and it had to end in that way. And so, if you've ever been in a locker room like that, you understand it. For those of you guys that haven't, you're thinking, that happens?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
that
yeah.
yes, that happens. So that's something I think about, because it goes back to that. Sometimes in life, we look at a situation and we're like, I don't know how I'm going to win this, right? And I may not have the money, I may not have the skill, the knowledge, the team, the whatever. But what you can always do is outwork the problem, right? And that's what I did. It's like, for me, he was a problem, and I knew that the only thing I could do was outwork him. And sometimes, then a lot of times, that's going to be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a critical moment for him too. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
he decided to leave. But maybe, hopefully, he's used that.
Yeah, hopefully he landed somewhere else, and that was pivotal for in his mind and whatever. And and the second thing, which is not inspirational or anything like that. I watched this is JUCO. I watched a 295-pound defensive end on a punt block, on a field goal block. He was the end protector.
Yeah.
They blocked a punt, and a defensive back picked the ball up and was headed the other way. I watched this 295-pound man walk him down.
Yeah.
And he ended up in the league. His name was Devron. His name was Devron Williams. He ended up in the NFL.
Oh yeah.
I remember standing on. I was like, what?
What just happened?
What just happened? A 300-pound man just walked down a sprinter. And I mean, that was not uncommon either. Like, you see shit like that all the time.
Super talented. I remember it. One of our receivers, he was just killing these guys. And he got to the point, like, he was running a hitch and go. And he just like, he just told him, he's like, I'm gonna take one step, fake, come back to the quarterback, and then I'm gonna run right past you for a touchdown, like on our sideline right next to us. And we're like, what is this dude doing? Yeah. Sure enough, yep.
That happens.
Step, hitch and
100%.
go, touchdown. Nothing they could do about it. I was
Yeah.
like, man, this is just a different world right here. So
and speaking of the Patriots, I actually got to play against Michael Bishop. He played at He went from
really?
He went from Blinn Junior College, which won the national championship when I was there, unfortunately for me. To Kansas State, and then went on to play for the Patriots and had a little bit of stint in the league. He was one of the most gifted human beings you've ever seen.
Right?
It was just, when you see something different, you're like, that's different. That's really different. So,
sure.
A lot of beautiful memories about that. And just, I wouldn't change it for the world. I had aspirations to go, D1 right out of high school, and it didn't happen for me. And, I've grown and expanded a lot because it didn't happen for me. And I wouldn't change a thing. Yeah. Loved it.
Definitely. Aaron Rodgers played football.
Nobody better, man.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really crazy to think about, but well, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate your time. What's one last thing? Like, if there's one or two things that you could share that if the listeners implemented today would help move their life forward today, what would that be?
Yeah. I'm a big believer, a little bit like the story that I said, it's like, I want you guys to understand that opportunity, the chances and the wins in your life are oftentimes going to be gift wrapped in the form of adversity. They're not going to show up. And so if you want something and you say, hey, God, universe, I want this, you're often going to be presented the opportunity to get that, but it's going to be having to overcome a challenge or an obstacle or something to get there. And then I think one of the things that I see missing, dramatically in the world that we live in today is just the self-belief that you really can be, do, and have the things that you desire out of life. If you're willing to apply, go back to that story I just talked about, outworking that kid.
Yeah.
If you're willing to outwork the problem, right? And insert problem for whatever you want it to be. If you're willing to just outwork it, oftentimes, 99% of the time, that's going to be enough to get you through the adversity. And then also the last thing I would leave you with is all adversity is an unanswered question. So that day at practice, I had to ask myself a question, and the question was, what can I do to overcome this adversity? Because I didn't listen. I just like him had never sat on the bench a day in my life. I started every game I'd ever played since I was T-ball. Right. And so for me, that wasn't an acceptable option. Sitting on the bench was not going to, would I have quit the team? No. But that wasn't an acceptable option for me. And so I made the decision, like, the only thing I can do is outwork it. And so make the decision on what the only thing you can do is, burn the boats and just go all in on it. So that would be the last thing I leave people with. And if you do that, you can live the life you really want to live. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What are a few ways we can find more about you and book and everything else?
The simplest thing, everything you can find about me, the books, my podcast, my everything. If you just go to Thrive Forever Fit. So the word thrive, the word forever, the word fit.com. That's my website. You'll see all the books, the podcast, everything I got's right there. And so, dude, I appreciate you, man. You're a rock star. I love chatting with you, dude. These are always fun.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. Thanks again for being on.
All right, brother. See you soon.